so here in my garage, I have my 2002 BMW 530i. The U-joint and the drive shaft are shot, and it makes a very odd metal-on-metal sounding noise when you let off the clutch or when you change the torque going from the engine to the transmission or to the drive shaft. So on eBay for 150 bucks, I bought this used drive shaft from an 03 530i. The guy didn't mention that it was missing a bolt in the rear bearing, so I'm gonna have to pop one out of my drive shaft when we get it out. Also, this isn't in as good of shape as I would have liked it to be. This center, I believe, bearing or center support. Either way though, he did say the U-joint was good. And then the other thing is we're going to have to get my flex disc off, which we could not do last time we pulled my drive shaft out. So this is going to be a fun day. Okay, so the first thing that needs to happen when you're changing your drive shaft is you need to cut the car up off the ground. So I like to jack it up in the middle and put jack stands on either side in the front. The jack will go on part of the frame right there. I don't know how well you can see that. If you didn't break this part off of your car, that's where the jack goes on, and that's where it's pretty close to right now under the car, except for the height of my car was just a little bit lower with this on it than the height of the jack, so after lifting it up a couple times, I just kind of broke it off because the jack didn't really fit under it. So now jack up the car and put jack stands on either side. Alright, so when doing jobs like this, I like to actually get the car up just about as high as I can. Since I'm in my garage, I will be laying under it versus having a lift where I can stand under it. So my recommendation is to get it up as high as you can. Uh-oh. It's not quite high enough. Hopefully it'll go up so the jack stands are even. If not, we're going to have to drop the one on the other side a click, which I don't really know. Darn it, we're going to have to drop it a click. That worked perfectly. Okay, I'm going to do this without the camera. Okay, so both jack stands are on the fourth click up. And I've noticed with this car, I don't have any shocks behind the rear wheels. I have it in gear and I have the e-brake on. But contrary to what you would think, notice how the jack is actually behind this a little bit. Like this would be right under it, this would be in front of it, and this is behind. I can't figure out why, but when you drop the car, it actually kind of rolls back a little bit. Despite, you know, the e-brake being on and the wheels in the back being in the same position that they're in when you lifted up the car. But yeah, when you're putting the jack stands on these cars, the E39s, put them behind a little bit. I've gotten to the point where I can line it up pretty much precisely and drop the jack without worrying about it, but I check it anyway. Alright, now that I got the front on jack stands, I'm going to lift the back up, and yes, I know I only have a jack on this side right now, there's nothing on the other side. However, it will still come up, and once it does come up, I'm going to put a jack stand under it and drop it on the jack stand, and then I'm going to do kind of a no-no, and I'm going to leave this jack under here for support, so I just don't have one side kind of dangling. Alright, so the car's all the way up, all the way around, and now we can start going under it. The first step, unfortunately, is to get the exhaust off. And you start getting the exhaust off right under here. I like to start with getting, there's 4 bolts that hold these 2 pipes on. The one on the top right over here is the worst to get to. Also got to take that middle bolt out so you can get the bracket off. Then I think it's best to go to the back and get the hanger off of this J-pipe right here. This is harder to get off, or it's not as hard to get off as one would probably think. There's a trick to it that involves pliers. And then for me, I have a makeshift exhaust hanger on the back to hold the tips up. I don't think you can see it from here. I'll bring the camera over in a second though. But I gotta get that off too. And then lastly, this needs to come off. That holds the exhaust on. And you're gonna want to have a jack stand under here, especially if you're doing this by yourself. Okay, so here's the part of my exhaust, just in case you're interested. I basically have, hold on, let me turn the light on here. I have right here the exhaust hanger, what the muffler was originally attached to. I have a carriage bolt going through it, and I have an exhaust clamp around the pipe. And basically I pulled on it with pliers. I pulled on the bolt in order to get this to stay up and fit into the bumper the way it does. And I pulled on that, I held it together while a buddy of mine just tightened the clamp down. And it seems to work, and we're going to have to do it again today, even though it took us about 20 minutes to figure out how to do that. Otherwise, oh, and if you're wondering, it's just resonator delete and muffler delete with some crappy homemade welds. Alright, so I'm going back under the car to take the exhaust off, or to start unbolting it. And I wanted to mention something odd about these 4 bolts here. If my memory serves me correctly, the one on the top right over that's hard to get to was a 15 and the rest of them are 14. So one of them is a different size. And I did have my clutch done by Fluid Motor Union, and they said they replaced all these bolts, which I'm calling BS on because they're in pretty bad shape already. But yeah, I guess that's how it's supposed to be because they replaced it with the same sizes that it was before. So yeah, I'm gonna start taking these off, and then I'll grab the camera again and start doing the next step. As I was talking about this thing earlier, all the oil on the ground or on the mat that I had under my car. Under here, I'll turn the light on the camera. That didn't really help. But, you know, I have oil dripping all the way down to here on the transmission. I have oil on the sway bar. The whole entire frame has oil droplets on it. The pan is just disgusting here. And, you know, I am almost sure the camera will not be able to see this. Plus, this might be upside down. I don't know. I can't see the screen right now, so I'm kind of aiming the camera blindly, but I don't know if you can see exactly, you know, that it's coming from the pan. But anyway, changing the oil pan on this car involves taking off the subframe, you know, all the way around, because the pan would absolutely hit the subframe when you drop it. So I don't want to do that. So yeah, you know, so if your car's leaking oil, your E39's leaking oil, and it looks like that, then it's your oil pan gasket. Okay. So how to get the exhaust hanger off here? You put one part of the pliers on the tip of the hanger and the other part on the other side of the rubber, and you just squeeze. And then you can tilt it a little bit, and then you'll get to the point where you can let go of the hanger. Let go of the hanger and the, whatever. And then you just kind of maneuver it out, and it's easier to do with 2 people. One person, you're just going to kind of have to work with it a little bit, but after you get it started and get the tip through the other side, then you're pretty much home free. I don't know how I did this last time though. It's almost there. And there we go. Out of the hanger. Okay, so my buddy's getting the middle support for the exhaust off, which is our last step in getting the exhaust off. There, you can see it. And these are all 13s, and there's 4 of them. And I know on mine at least one side when you pull it off the heat shield drops. After we get the exhaust off, there are two heat shields we got to take off, and then this part that supports the transmission, which we have to do extra work on because we snapped 2 bolts off of it last time we took the drive shaft out. Okay, so we got my exhaust out. Here it is. Here are some of the best welds you'll ever see in your life. Anyway, back to the car. Like I was saying, the next step is heat shields. So this heat shield, I believe these are 10s. Do you remember, Titus?
They're 10 or 8.
Okay, either 8 or 10. Anyway, you got that bolt, and there's supposed to be 2 over there. I only got 1 though, so that's why I was saying this side kind of falls when you take the exhaust manifold off. But anyway, you get that off, and then you have to get this smaller one off, and then that exposes pretty much your whole drive shaft. This, believe it or not, doesn't get in the way. This support here. However, the one for the transmission does. Otherwise, you can't really get the flex disc off. And on this drive shaft, it's another thing. So I mean, it has 6 bolts that hold it on. 3 of them hold the drive shaft to the flex disc. 3 of them hold the flex disc to the transmission. And one of the bolts holding the flex disc to the drive shaft is absolutely rounded and ruined, and it's tight. It's really tight, so we're gonna take a heat gun to it and just see if we can get it off. But yeah, so anyway, that's the next step. Okay, so we got the heat shields off, both of them. They were actually 8mm bolts that were on there. So going back over here, the next step is to get the transmission bracket, I don't know what the actual term for it is off, but this is important. First time I did this, I did not support the transmission. When I took this off, the trans fell and it tilted the engine and everything too, so don't do that. But this is what I was talking about. We snapped this bolt off, and we snapped this bolt off. So if your car isn't frequently worked on and you've never taken this off before, spray it with some sort of penetrating oil before you go and start breaking the bolts. And yeah, support the transmission. But there's 8 bolts on here, or 6 bolts and 8 nuts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts. And then right up there's a nut, right up, and there's a nut. And the nut's attached to the transmission, the bolt's attached to the frame of the car. Okay, so I got all the ones on my side off. He's still working on his side. I believe the next step in this is to start taking the rear bearing off the differential. Oh, by the way, all the bolts on what he's doing are 13s. Okay, so yeah, it's time to start getting these off. I can't really see the camera. There we go. There's no light on. There. Those bolts right there need to come off. And that's a stud that was missing on my new differential too. We're gonna have to pop one of those out. But yeah, I don't remember what size those are, but I'll grab the camera again a little later and tell you. Alrighty, so I've gotten all the bolts off of this. Oh, will you unlock the drivetrain?
Yeah, I got you.
Alright, so I have the e-brake and the car in gear, so I could actually break the bolts. Alright, so now it's out of gear. So I can spin this, and you can see right here there's a little slot. I'm going to move myself right under the drive shaft. But yeah, there's a little slot right here. Just put a screwdriver in there, and you can see the bearings start to move out. I would recommend using a bigger screwdriver, but this is the one I had outside. And then just spin it a little bit until you get to the next groove. There's 2 of them, 1 on each side. And then you pop this groove out, and then by that point it's significantly looser. I don't know, usually don't have to go back to the first one. Okay. I also had 2 hands last time. Okay. So yeah, obviously this isn't going to work right now. The other thing you got to do, and this is why it's not working, that center support right there has got to be taken out. and the drive shaft will drop in the middle. If you really care about the drive shaft, then you put a jack stand under it so it doesn't fall. But other than that, yeah, you drop that, and then you can kind of finesse this out of here, and then you take the flex disc off up in the front, and then the drive shaft's out.
Last one?
Yeah, it was your phone. Okay, so the next step in removing drive shaft, like I said, is to pull get the center bearing thing out, as he's doing. Those are 13mm bolts. I don't know if I mentioned it, but on the bearing in the back, somewhere back there, they were actually 16. So yeah, he's gonna get that out. Like I said, it's gonna drop in the middle, and then we can pull it back off. So yeah, you really got to work with this. I basically put a couple fingers on the differential part of this, and then my thumbs on the drive shaft part of it, and you just kind of got to push it out. And it really does feel like you're stretching something or bending something, and you're really not. I mean, these parts are really tough. So here, let me take my gloves off before I grab the camera, because we took this off about 2 weeks ago, and we lubricated the inside of it. And by the way, Titus, it's completely black lube now.
Oh, okay, okay.
It was yellow when we put it in there. Woo! Okay. So here we go. This is what this looks like on the inside of the differential side. Just there's the holes. Just a plate. Nothing special. On the drive shaft side, a lot more lube on this side. Can't really see it too well. There are bearings in there. This isn't my problem though. This part of my drive shaft is in really good shape. My U-joint shot. You can't tell that by looking at it or feeling it, but it makes quite a noise. Like I said in the beginning, when you're changing how much torque goes from the engine to the drivetrain. Anyway, though, the next step would be to actually screw the middle support back in. Not all the way. Don't get it tight. Doesn't really matter. You just need it to hold on while you start messing with the front. And when you're messing with the front, you got to have it in gear. If you can. I'm not going to do it because I didn't do it this way the first time, and I don't want to risk not being able to do it and then having to put something back on. But you can just lock the e-brake and it'll lock everything as long as you still have this bearing connected to the differential. But yeah, if you have the engine in gear, then that part's not going to move with you turning a wrench on it. So that's what I would do. I'd leave it in gear to get the flex disc off of the trans. And we're going to do that in a little while after we probably eat.
This is great. Did you get the guac yet?
Yeah,
Pretty good, right?
That's pretty good.
It goes well.
Alright, so here's the drive shaft. We got it out. Brought the flex disc with it. I have one more bolt to take off of that down there, and I gotta get this one the rest of the way out. This was our frozen bolt. As you can see, there's a lot of wear on it. I basically had to put those two, these are 18mm by the way, both sides. Well, put it so the wrench was up in the air and the socket was on the ground, and basically had to stand on it. And it finally freed up, and that was after I put a heat gun on it. So yeah. And now we're gonna eat our Chipotle. Alright, so now we're putting the flex disc back on the transmission. We have the drive shaft back under the car, the new one. So I'm just getting this tight. We have the center support here. This is connected in the middle, just so we could, tighten these bolts, and then we have that down there, and then as soon as I'm done tightening these bolts, this is going to come back off, and that's going to go into the differential, and then we can start putting bolts back on the differential, and then the drive shaft will be back in. Okay, so I recommend you wear goggles now because I was drilling a broken bolt out and I got metal in my eye, and now my eye hurts, so wear goggles. at this point, we have the drive shaft back in fully from front to back. We had to knock the studs out in the back and then put it back in once we lined them up because it wouldn't go in. I'm still drilling out holes on, I can't see this transmission plate here because I snapped another bolt. So we're going to have to move another bolt later. But I'm going to do that after we get the rest of the car together because I don't want to borrow my mom's car again. So, yep. Alright, so we have the transmission bracket on as good as we can get it. I couldn't back out that other bolt. Where is it? There it is. That's the transmission bracket. So we're going to do that later. This doesn't get covered, so and I don't have another screw anyway. What we're going to do first is we're actually going to like try it because my U-joint was bad and it made a funny sound, like I said. So we're actually going to try to start the car and the exhaust is not on it, so it's going to be really loud. Alright, I don't hear it anymore.
Do it again.
What? That's fine. It always made that weird little sound.
Yeah.
I think that's actually the transmission. Alright, I think we're good. You gonna look at it? Here, actually take the camera down there. Why not?
Is it on?
Yeah. Alright, so we're at the point where we're putting the exhaust back on. I'm not going to record us putting the actual exhaust back on. I'm just going to tell you how to do it. So you're going to start with the front, have a friend or a jack stand or both, hold the back of the exhaust up, drag the front of the exhaust, it goes on there. Make sure you put the gasket on. These are angled down, so the gasket is actually, they keep falling off while you're trying to put it on. It's a pain. Make sure you remember to put this bracket here back on, and it only actually goes over this exhaust, not this one. Goes over that one like that. But yeah, it's way too hard to record us putting the exhaust back on. So, but yeah, you want to do the front first, and then you put the hanger back on right here. This is a hanger. And then, I showed you how to take that off. And then you put the middle support back on right there. And then, if you have a stock muffler, I would assume you could probably put that on last. And that's what I'm going to do with mine, even though I kind of have a makeshift hanger. So yeah, we'll show you when it's done.